Hey guys, it's SonicalSG, and I'm here to tell you guys that I've been working on a video lately that's very special to me, and that's why I haven't posted for a while, even though it's been 7 months. So I decided to record this video to fill in the gaps so I get done with the video. So sit back and relax as I tell you the story of the Russian sleep experiment. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awakened for 15 days using experimental gas-based simulation. They were kept sealed in an environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intakes so the gas didn't kill them, since it was so toxic in concentration. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and a 5-inch glass proportion size windows into the chambers to monitor them. The chambers were stocked with books and cots to sleep on, but no bedding, as well as running water, a toilet, and enough dried food to last them for over 5 months. The test subjects were politician prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everyone was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past life. The general tone of their conversation took a more dark aspect after the 4th day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and the events that led to them where they were, and started to demonstrate several paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering into the microphones and one-way mirror holders. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the spirit rooms by turning over their comrades, the other subjects, in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected that this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started to scream. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight, at which point he continued to attempt to scream, but he was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior was how the other captives reacted, or rather didn't react. They continued whispering into the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books apart, smearing page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass boards. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering into the microphones. After 3 days more passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it was impossible that no sound could be occurring with the 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen that 5 people would consume at very high levels of sensation exercises. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something that they said they would not do if they get reactions from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chambers, hoping to provoke any response from these people that were afraid either death or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chambers to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the ground or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of your inmates intimate freedom." To their first surprise, they heard a calm voice respond in a single phrase. "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more responses using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chambers at midnight on the 15th day. The chambers were flush of the stimulation gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began to beg. as if pleading of the life of beloved ones, to turn back the gas on. The chamber was open, and the soldiers were sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers what they saw inside. 4 to 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call that in that state of them any life. Their food rations past the 5 days have not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meats from the dead test subjects, thigh and chest stuffed into the drain of the center of the chamber, blocking it, and all 4 inches of the water of the company on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of their muscles and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of the flesh and exposed bones on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as the researchers initially thought. Close examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. The abominable organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects have been removed, while the heart and lungs and diaphragm remain in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs have been ripped off, exposing lungs through the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact, but had been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the skeleton but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestion tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food, but it quickly became apparent that they were digesting their own flesh that they have ripped off or have eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were Russian specially overseas at the facility, but many refused to return to the chambers to remove the test subjects. The subjects themselves began to continue to scream to be left in the chamber and beg and demanded that the gas would be turned back on, unless they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put in a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out, and another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and every in his leg, severed by one of the test subjects' teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you count the ones that committed suicide in the follow incident. In the struggle of one of the 4 living subjects, his spleen ruptured and bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this was proven impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose for morphine to beta and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and the arms of one of the doctors. His heart was seen beating for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out, to the point there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flare for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and just repeating the word "more" over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The 3 surviving test subjects were heavily restrained and removed from the medical facility. The 2 with intact voice curdle consistently begged for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most of the injured was taken to the surgical operating room that the facility had, in the process of preparing the test subjects to have his organs placed back within his body. It was found that he was given effectively immune to sedatives they had given him to prepare for the surgery. He fought seriously against the restraints, and the Xanax gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear away most of his 4-inch leather straps on one of the wrists, even though the weight of the soldier was 200 pounds. Holding the wrist, it only took more than a little aesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyes fluttered and closed, and his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died, the operating table, it was found that much of his blood and triple had tripled, and the normal level of oxygen. The muscles that were still intact to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle to not be sedated. Most of them were from the force of his own muscles and strength on them. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed. He had unable to beg or eject to his surgery. He had only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the extended gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested repeatedly that they should try the surgery without anesthetics, and did not react for an entire 6 hours proceeding of the replacement of his abundant organs and attempt to cover them with what was remained of his skin. The surgeons persisted to say repeatedly that it should not be medically possible for the patient to be still alive. One of the terrified nurses assisted this surgery and started that she see the patient's mouth curl into a several smiles, wherever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the test subjects looked at the surgeons and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this something be of dramatic importance, the surgeon had to pen and a pad to fetch to the patient, so he can write a simple message called "Keep cutting." The other 2 subjects were given the same surgery without anesthetics through, although they had to be injected with parasites for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patient slept consistently. Once paralyzed, the subject could only follow the intended researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their systems in an overly short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they can speak, they were asking for the gas symbolization. The researchers tried to ask why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they only gave in to the gas. Only one response was given: "I must remain awake." All 3 test subjects were enforced, and they were placed back into the chambers, waiting for determination as they should be done with. The researchers, faced with the wrath of the military benefactors for having failed the state of goals in the projects, considered euthanizing the survival test subjects. The commander officer, an ex-KBJ, instead saw potential, and he wanted to see what would happen if they put the gas on. The researchers strongly rejected, but was overruled. In preparation of being sealed in the chamber again, the test subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling at the moment, and let them slip. They were going back to the gas. It was obvious that this point, all 3 were put in a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his leg against the leather bond with all his might. First left, then right, then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subjects were holding his head off the pillow, breathing rapidly. Having been the first time to be wired to an EEG monitor, most of the researchers were monitoring his brain waves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flattened unexpectedly. It looked like as if he was repeatedly suffering brain death before turning toward a normal. As they focused on the papers scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only Wonder saw the man's eyes slip shut at the moment of it as he hit the pillow head. His brain waves immediately changed to a deep sleep and then flatlined for the last time, as his heart suddenly stopped. The remaining test subjects that could speak started to scream to be sealed in now. His brain was showing the same flatlines as the one who just died from falling asleep. The comrades gave him the order to seal the chambers with both test subjects inside, as well as the researchers. One of them name 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between his eyes. Then turned on the gas, the mute subject, and blew his brain out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to the bed. The remainder of the members of the medical and research team fled the room. Want to be locked in here? Leave with these things, not you! He screamed at the man strapped to the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Haven't you forgotten so easily? The subject asks, We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you, all begging to be set free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are the what you hide in your beds every night. We are the what you sedate into silence and paralyzation when you go into a natural heaven where we can thread. The researcher paused and then aimed at the subject's heart and then fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject choked out. So, dearly free.